Welcome to Curating Tools, a podcast which explores the practical aspects of curatorial work. Through conversations with some of the most prolific curators and art professionals in the creative sector, we aim to provide you with tools and advice to help you develop your curatorial practice. This podcast is brought to you by Call for Curators, a platform promoting professional opportunities since 2012, and Node Center for Curatorial Studies, the first e-learning platform for curators and art professionals founded in 2009. Call for Curators members get access to the expanded versions and members-only episodes of the Curating Tools podcast. Prior to recording, they have the opportunity to send questions to our guests and then hear their responses in the expanded episodes. If you'd like to shape upcoming episodes and gain access to more members-only content, get a free trial via the link in the description. Welcome to this new episode of Curating Tools Podcast. My guest today is An Paenhuysen, who's a curator, writer, and art critic based in Berlin. After completing her doctorate in cultural history, Anne started her curatorial career at Hamburger Bahnhof Museum of Contemporary Art in Berlin. And from 2019 to 2022, she was the director of the House of the Deadly Doris, where she organized eventualities to activate its 1980s punk archive. And is a fan of the small format, and in 2020 she founded the publishing project AP, Publishing for Short Art Writing. She is a part of the collective Minisa that bridges the disciplines of writing, visual arts, somatics, and dance. And we're here with Anne today. Anne is also the leader of creative art writing course at Node Center for Curatorial Studies. So, Anne, thank you very much for joining me and welcome to Curating Tools. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Maria. Thanks for inviting me. Nice to talk.
So today we'll be delving more into the topic of art writing. And I just read your bio, bringing your experience to our listeners a bit more. But I'm really interested in hearing about how did you decide to pursue art writing as a career? So it's such an essential skill for, curators and culture workers. And I'm interested in hearing your journey into this field of art criticism and writing, whether this happened quite organically through your curatorial practice, or was it something that you really were determined to do on its own?
Yeah. Yes, that's way back. So, if you say career, it sounds so big. So art criticism, it sounds always like, this hobby that I do, this to write about art. But so what you said in the bio also, I'm a cultural historian. So I worked in academia and I started working in the contemporary art world and didn't know anything about contemporary art. So starting to work at Hamburger Bahnhof was like going to university. It was perfect to learn about art. And there I had to start really from the beginning. So I had to start writing labels and writing short texts for artworks and exhibitions. And that's kind of the most difficult genre, actually, an underrated genre that exists, to write a text in an exhibition. So that was a good learning school. And we talked a bit about this before, how tiring it can be to pitch, right? So I also started pitching, got quite tired of it really quickly. And then I was traveling to Iceland and I was pitching about it to write about an exhibition. Everyone said it was too far. They were not interested. Iceland back then was still too far. That was like 2009 or something. So I started my own blog, and that's when I really started to enjoy writing. Before didn't really enjoy writing, or it was not about writing. As an academic, it was about transmitting content or to study research, but it was not about, also strangely enough, you don't learn at university the pleasure of writing also. So it was only when I started to write about art, to blog also, so to write whatever I wanted to write, that I really started to enjoy it, because you can be personal in art writing. You can say I. In academics, you can't say I. You have to be so-called neutral, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and your blog is very personal. A lot of the posts that you make, the writing that's on there, it even starts from a very personal point from your own experience. I read a few of these pieces on your blog, and one that starts with a piece you got from a Yoko Ono exhibition that's in your collection, and another really beautiful piece of writing where it started from a coloring book, a coloring in exercise. So it's really wonderful to see kind of writers' kind of personality or experiences through writing as well.
Yeah. I started doing it, and when I started doing it, because writing art criticism is quite scary, right? You put your opinion out there. To be critical is a scary activity. So when I first started out, I always gave it to a friend before I posted it to just be sure, is this okay? I was just like, and but after a while, I just started posting it like that. But yeah, so it was. I still love blogging now. I don't do it as often as I used to do. I think it's great to be able to publish something. Also, if you don't have a platform for it or in a magazine, and you can write about anyone you want and the way you want. So it has although blogging is not popular anymore at the moment. Everyone's podcasting rather. Actually, there's a new thing that people do now, that's Substack, to write a newsletter to them.
Yeah, but this decision to start your own blog, exactly, was this a result of kind of the difficulties that come with working as a freelance critic or writer and working with magazines? How was this decision made?
Yes, it was because it was difficult to pitch and to get something published about artists that I wanted to publish about. It seemed like it was only possible if you write about a museum exhibition and about the artists that are on the top 10 list, and so I was quite frustrated by that process of pitching. And then I also find art criticism such a wide genre. It can be anything, it can be academic, it can be journalism, it can be diary style. You can make a vlog, you can, embodied writing, you can write poetry. That's also the highest form to write about art, right? Writing poetry. So I feel like with the blog, I could just do whatever I wanted, and I could also evolve with it freely. I could evolve with what I was into at that point, and then I could just do that on my blog without asking anyone's permission to do so.
I think with the rise of blogging or later podcasting or social media, do you feel like these new technologies or new ways of writing about art, do they democratize this process? Because I believe like historically it was kind of more of a broadcast medium where a writer was putting out their opinion but really had no chance of real feedback, while now feedback can happen in real time. So do you think how do you think it opens up this field or shapes it?
Yes, I think it's great. So I think at the moment that art criticism is really flourishing and writing is flourishing, and so many interesting initiatives are happening at the moment. And about art criticism is also wider about criticism, cultural criticism, something to be expanded. So I'm really excited about that. Like, it doesn't only have to be online. Like last week, I met an artist here in Berlin, Sarah Lehnerer, and she's part of a team that organizes a reading group, Texte zum Nachdenken. It's a beautiful German title, Texts to Reflect. It doesn't sound that great in English.
Oh, but that's a really beautiful description of a reading group, because there's
Yes.
more than just reading that happens in reading groups.
I was excited to hear that. And in Latvia, I have a friend in Riga, Elina Kempele, who does this art yearbook. So she really creates a magazine every year, a yearbook about art to further art criticism in Riga. So many people are also interested now in also the paper, the writing, bookbinding, making own publications. I think a lot of new institutions, also people start making their own magazines, their own institutions, gathering their friends around them. So I write sometimes for an editor in Vienna. She's Erka Shalari, and she does this magazine, Le Nouveau Riche magazine, and she's very open for proposals. So I'm doing a movers and shakers series there now. It's not so often that you can propose a column anymore, to a magazine, and it's about people I meet when I travel. I just did one with an interview with a Saudi Arabian publisher, a woman publisher, who started a publishing house for Arabic criticism and literature. So I think it's really thriving at the moment, I feel.
So you don't believe in the kind of some conversations that say that there's a death of art criticism happening?
There's this book by James Elkins, is that 2008? And I think the death of art criticism has been a myth that's been going on for a long time. And I actually just recently heard that Dave Hickey died in 2021. I didn't know. He's a great art critic, right? And he always quit art criticism after a few years. It was always like he made this big statement how he was going to quit art criticism. He was tired of art criticism. So I feel like now Dave Hickey is not around anymore. The death of art criticism is really over.
It's also flourishing, like you say, and I think it's really interesting to see that despite all these new developments in technology, which have very negative impact on publishing as well. I mean, we've seen a lot of magazines, a lot of publications fire their staff, and because now with opportunities that AI gives of writing, the human editor behind is not longer necessary. But that's one side of it, what's happening. And the other side, like you mentioned, there's all these new initiatives, and people are also more interested in actual physical books and publications. Can you talk a bit more about the kind of revival of the physical publishing formats? And maybe in context of your publishing project.
So somebody told me lately about AI, said, but there will always be people who want to write. And I was like, okay, that's true. So I felt a bit better about my profession as a teacher of art criticism. So there will always be writers, people who want to express themselves and want to be critical. And I think it's a kind of a revival in general, maybe since the pandemic or something, that everyone was doing bookbinding and making zines, and publishing houses started. So obviously, I'm also part of the zeitgeist. So I also started one just when the pandemic started. And it's called, you said it in a short way. It was good because I like short. But it's AAAAA Publishing, it's called. Because I like silliness also. I like also a lot minor resources, and so things that are not taken so seriously. And the art review tends to be so important. It's very the important critic, the important review, the judgment, that you do, and it's very connected to a certain body that
it does seem reviews. Elitist in many ways, at least historically. It was you had to have a certain position, I guess, to write criticism.
Exactly, and everything else was considered silly, like as everything that doesn't fit that image. I remember going to a talk a few years ago of an editor of the Nordic Review, and he summed up what an art review had to be, and it was 5 parts, and the end was the judgment. And I find that so crazy. So to have a judgment part of the art review. But that's the serious art review. So anyway, so AAPPP Publishing, if you pronounce it out loud, you can't help to sound silly. So I kind of like that. It's not able to pronounce it in an important way. And it's for short format writing, because short format is also sometimes not considered to be very important. You have to write long sentences, complicated sentences, long books, and everything that's like the short story, the novella, is considered less important, less valuable for literature. So I'm interested in these things. So that's why I started it. And I'm publishing pamphlets, and also pamphlets of people I meet. So when I meet someone, it started out actually while teaching at the art university. And my students we're writing such good things. And I was like, oh, it's a pity that nobody's publishing it. So I started it with my students, and we started a series for new teaching and new learning. And that's how I got started. Yeah.
It's fantastic to bring this opportunity to students. But it seems that from what you're saying, it seems that you don't really believe in like a prescribed way of approaching writing, creative writing, art criticism. You like short form. But are there some steps or some processes in your writing practice that are helpful, that can also be helpful to our listeners who maybe want to write about art? Is there kind of are there ways that you enjoy writing through?
So the main thing why I started writing was also because I wanted to think about art. And so I think it's totally fine to have a very selfish reason why you write and why you write criticism. Also, it's to think. So I think it's a great, and you have it also in all other kinds of literature. I read it in Patricia Highsmith's book about writing suspense, and Stephen King's book about writing thrillers, right? You don't have to think before you write. Stephen King doesn't know the plot before he starts writing his book. Otherwise, he wouldn't surprise himself, he says, right? And I feel the same with art criticism, and that can take away a lot of fears when you start writing, because you think, I have to know what I'm going to say, I have to say something substantial and so on, right? But you write actually to think. The thinking comes while writing. I wouldn't think if I wouldn't write, basically. So I think it's for everyone, if you publish it or not. After you've seen an exhibition, it's nice to sit down for a cup of coffee and to just do some flow writing, to just write also whatever comes up. Even you can go away from the artwork, you can to wherever it brings you. Good art can be opened up in all kinds of directions.
I think that's also what makes, art so wonderful, such a wonderful subject to write about, and art kind of what it is as well, that it's kind of what our own experiences that we bring into it. Not that there isn't a prescribed way of approaching or experiencing art, because it really is all about your experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny how often in art criticism, the critic is not really there, and it's really strange, but the person is not there in the writing. It's just like empty, which is strange because it is about a bodily experience, right? It is a personal experience. So
can you share an example or from your writing, can you share an artwork that really brought you a lot of joy and pleasure to write about? It was kind of experience maybe recently or something from the past.
Yes. So recently I saw actually two good shows at the Tate in London when I was visiting. First, the Yoko Ono exhibition, and then the Philip Guston exhibition before. And especially actually with Philip Guston, I was really surprised because before I didn't really have an opinion about it. I thought it was a bit comic, kind of, his painting. But then to see it for real really blew me away. I was so energized. I was so elated after it. And I think that's a sign of a good exhibition, is when you feel excited. and there's this little extra, no, as if a new space opened up in your head. And then I always like to wait a few days to let that settle down in the body. A friend of mine calls it aesthetic delay. So it has to settle in. And then after a few days, when you're back home, to try to put your finger on it. What is it exactly that made me so excited? And it's nice because memory gives you a perfect selection of details. No? What you remember is really interesting. And then to start write about that, and then by writing, trying to figure out, how did it do that? What was it? So, yeah.
So it really seems like for you, it's more about writing is a process, not only in the sense of, you choose a gallery, a show you go to, and then analyze it or, make an opinion and then write it down. It's also about kind of putting your pen to the paper or your fingers to your keyboard and just starting kind of letting the subconscious see through.
Maybe not so much the subconscious, although I just read actually on Jerry Salt's Instagram, that's how he does it. So when he goes to a few exhibitions, he comes home, makes Post-its of the main words that he remembers or that come up. And then he starts flow writing for 2 hours, 3 hours, which is very long. Yeah. Yes, so just write whatever comes up. I don't do that so much, but I do look for an entry point. I see but Stephen King calls it the mind's eye. You try to evoke the exhibition again. And what was it? The flowers in the exhibition that were on the desk? Was it what someone said? So to find an entry point or something in the painting or some detail that you read, and then to start with that. And then in the end, you can still rewrite the whole thing. No, so but it's nice to find a bit of you can call it a punctum, no? Something that pierces you, something that really touches you, and to start from there.
We're talking about the process of writing and how it's coming from a personal space as well. But how do you approach writing for certain audiences? Because I feel like that's also quite a challenging task. How do you think about your audience while writing?
I'm not the best person to ask, actually, because I don't really think about my audience. I always find it weird when writing classes or writing books about writing say that think about your audience and then start to write. I just write for my very own pleasure, and I write for myself, something that entertains me. And I think if I have joy in reading it and writing it, and I'm happy with it, and go into a flow, some other people must like it too, and must at least sense the pleasure, the joy. And that's for me, that's nice. But when I wrote also for my blog, actually, it wasn't so much about the audience, how many people read it sometimes. I mean, 2-3 people is enough. It's okay. It's not so much about the audience for me, but it's about, I do believe that sharing your writing is important, because somehow it does something to put it out there. It is different as just writing for yourself.
Absolutely.
And it helps you to develop, it helps you to somehow you are thinking in a way about something out there, about an audience. Yes.
It's interesting to hear that, because kind of taking into consideration your background in curating roles as well. And as you said, writing text for museums or labels. I thought that kind of that is definitely something that curators do think about, like who the text is for, who the exhibition statement is for.
I just try to make it entertaining, I do like to, also when I give a talk or anything, I do want to give my audience a good time. So that's maybe, I do think entertainment is a plus.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of wondering if there was like a process of unlearning, going from working with an institution, writing institutional text, to writing more for yourself, or, and kind of sharing it with others without really having a specific audience in mind.
Yes. True. I actually recently had to write for a catalog, and I knew it had to be a certain way and certain expectations, and I knew what kind of catalog. And somehow I wrote something. I wasn't not very pleasurable. I was quite academic, and I think it's quite boring in the end. So I'm not so. Anyways, and now I had to write for a catalog, kind of the same subjects, but the curator was really open and very allowed me. And it's so much fun putting it together. And I felt like it came really to something else. I really had some pleasurable results while researching it. So the form of your writing also defines the form. The form is also part of the content, right? If you have to have a very academic, strict form and you have to follow that format, the content is also a bit stiff. So for me to write in different, it was really liberating, to be able to write in anecdotes, to tell stories, to just not follow the formal constraints of academic writing is very liberating for me. And it creates a different content according to me. It creates new knowledge, different knowledge. Yeah.
I was also wondering with, you mentioned kind of knowledge production, but while sharing your writing, are there, or in the process of writing, are there any like ethical considerations that other critics should keep in mind when writing? Would you say, I think I'm interested to hear, as I'm sure our listeners, what is the ethics of writing? Does it kind of differ between the art forms the writing form that you take part in? Is there, like an ethics code that's different for writing art reviews and writing for your blog? I'm just interested in your opinion.
I think there's ethics, and also ethics in art, by the way, not only in art writing, art criticism, because sometimes one thinks that you can do whatever in art. I think art also has ethics, and writing for sure. Being critical is a dangerous activity, so to put yourself out there is it is also to be careful. It depends also on what what kind of space you've created for yourself. So, for instance, if you look at Roberta Smith, she's very careful in her formulations. It's very thoughtful. It's more academic in a way, which is also nice. She's very subtle. She's careful in the way she formulates things. Like you may, and there's a way of formulating it. You could think here, or you may. So, whereas then Jerry Salt is much more grrr and sigh and whatever. He's known for whatever it comes up in his head that he writes it. So there are different approaches, and it depends on what kind of space you've. Like Jerry Saltz can allow himself, right? He has created a space for him to do so, which is great. And but ethics, I think, basically is to art criticism is not venting. It's not venting. Some think it's like to be this negative or to vent and to say whatever. You do that with friends, but you don't do that. You don't do that with people. So you can vent in private, I mean, right? But if you go public, you think you let it rest a bit. When you're angry about something, for instance, you have to let it rest and then a few days and check. Truman Capote said you have to write it with a cold head, so not in emotion. But you can evoke the emotion that you had, but you do it with a cold head. So, and then it means also you find your arguments for it, and they have to be factual arguments. If you're not agreeing with something, but you find your good arguments for it that are not emotional, right? And especially women critics, actually, you get easily brushed off, frustrated critic, women critic, frustrated, right? So you have to, so therefore, anyways, I think you have to have your good arguments if you really go against something, and you should never go against the artist. So you don't go personal.
I think that's really important point that you made, that art criticism, art writing is inventing and kind of writing with a cold head. And is there, you said to have factual arguments. What are the kind of tactics or, ways of maintaining objectivity? Because, we talked about how art writing is such a personal, subjective thing. It can be that. But how do you maintain also being objective? How do you balance these two? I'm interested.
Right. It is a subjective experience, but at the same time, there are criteria for good art, and they're pretty objective. One of them is time. Time will tell if something is if it's just hot air and it's over in a year, it will tell. So time is the best criteria. I used to give guided tours. That's also a really good criteria. If you give a tour about an artwork 100 times and you're still excited after the 100 times, that's good art. If you're bored after the second time, it's probably not good art. So anyways, there are criteria and more also for good art. And to stay neutral, I think, is to go back to the artwork, not to manipulate it with your own projections, right? And to just describe what you see. It's very basic. And that's a critical activity. That's very critical because most people don't see. And you just describe what you see. And you learn as an art critic to see more and more and more. And with experience, you can really see a lot, no? And ask questions. Oh, why is that? Why do they use that color? Why do they make it round? Or so to ask questions, and that's a critical activity. You don't have to answer them, but you question things and don't make them so easy. And if the artist then thinks that you're, that they didn't mean it like that or that, but then they haven't thought it through well enough. So I think it's just by describing very clear what you see that I mean with factual arguments. Just go to the artwork and describe what is happening. If it just repeats what you already know, if it doesn't open up anything new, that's also a criteria. It's not good art. So if it repeats cliches, hierarchies, stereotypes in thinking, So
you mentioned giving tours, art tours, and that kind of made me think that really resonated with me what you said about giving the art tour and not being bored by the art for the end of time when you talk about it. And it made me think about the storytelling aspect that good art also has, that it can be that they kind of create stories and share stories in a very similar manner than art writing does. So I believe it is a much more interesting exercise when, as a writer, you have a story to pick up and maybe put apart, rather than having to invent your own story, but something that lacks it.
Yes. One of my favorite critics is Eileen Myles. She's also a poet and a novelist. And she says that writing about art is like making a second art. And it's like to go inside the artwork, to run around in it and see what it allows you to do. How far does it let you go, right? And that seems such a pleasurable way also to go about. If you hear that as an image of what art criticism is, like, oh, okay, that sounds like a lot of fun. It's like a playground, basically. But also with its limitation, with its boundaries, how far it lets you go. The artwork does call you back, so you go always back to the artwork. Yeah. So, yeah. Or Trus Martinez, she says that art criticism or, writing about art is like art tickles her. So it's like, and you can't tickle yourself. It's impossible to tickle yourself. And she sees the art as this thing that tickles you when you find out, oh, what is it? What is that tickling? Oh, how does it do that? Which is also a fun way to start thinking about writing about art.
I love that kind of that art writing is also like a, the playground and kind of being tickled by art. But doesn't it mean that it's a very kind of a solitary thing to do? Is it solitary? or is there a way of kind of, sharing it and making it a more collaborative process?
Yeah. I'm very interested in co-writing at the moment, co-creation. I'm very interested at the moment in Fluxus, who did a lot of a movement that did a lot of co-writing, like Robert Filiou. He did these co-writing poems, and I love co-writing. Yeah, one of my favorite poems of him is a Letting Go poem, where you ask people to write on post-its to write something they would like to let go of, and then you take them all together and you read them out loud. So there are ways to write together. I mean, I've done in the past, like even a WhatsApp chat box, with a friend talking about an exhibition, things like that. But is it solitary? That's a good question. Actually, I like to be alone myself, so I don't know if I would see it so. But it's important, I would say. Writing is something you mostly do on your own. But it's important to have colleagues. It's important to collaborate and to create readings together and have people you support, write reviews about each other, to support each other for sure. And to have colleagues is very important.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that you used to kind of regularly ask your colleagues to review or to kind of have a look at your writing before getting it published.
I think, there's a lot in collaboration. And I think at the moment, many people are interested in that, collectives and working together. So it's definitely happening.
But I guess like with any collaboration, there can emerge a hierarchy or some kind of uneven power dynamics while co-writing with other people.
It depends. Actually, it is true. I've been co-writing lately, but not so much for review, but for curatorial idea and with Mariko Mikami, a curator from Düsseldorf, and with Michael Beron from Berlin. And it was so much fun. We did on a Google Doc. We wrote together. And it was so much fun because we both sparkled. It was just by writing together, it sparkled the ideas, and it was a sprinkle between us. So it was ideal. It doesn't happen that much that you meet people that really, you do ping pong and the ideas really sparkle together, So that is fantastic when you find that. And then it's quite on an equal level. You're just inspiring each other and you're supporting each other actually to think even more outside the box. And it allows you, the other person allows you, go for it. Something that you wouldn't do on your own. So there are many things that you can't do on your own that you can do together because there's people saying, yes, you can do that. It's a great idea. So I think that's great about collaboration.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of coming of different voices to create something that's even more unique.
That you wouldn't do on your own, right? On your own, you would be like, oh my God. But yes, it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. But kind of thinking about kind of different voices coming, like do you, for people who are maybe at the beginning of their journey, of beginning of writing, do you think it is important to find your own voice in writing, and is it important? Does it take time? Do you arrive at a certain point, or does it change over time?
It's such a difficult thing, right? The voice. What is my voice in writing? It's such a phantom. I don't know, but I think it's something definitely you gain by writing a lot. There's only one remedy to get to find out how you write. It's by writing a lot, and you will get more and more comfortable, and your own character will shine through more and more. So that's why it's good to write daily. And even if it's 2-3 minutes, I think it's good for your hand not to get rusty, to just 2 to 5 minutes max, in the morning. I have this coffee cup exercise that I love. That's my favorite exercise, where you drink your cup of coffee in the morning and just write a few sentences. The more banal, the better. People think always that for writing, they have to write important things or they have to write something interesting, but actually the beauty also if you read novels, the beauty is in the everyday, very, very small little things that you don't need any more material. Also with art criticism, it's already there. You don't need to say something bombastic. You come out with something outrageous, or do something too special to project yourself in. And what annoys me sometimes about autofiction in art criticism, it's you're there in your writing. You don't have to. It's obvious, no? How can you not be there in your writing? It's a mystery, but apparently it is more difficult than one thinks. I guess it's connecting with a bit of vulnerability in writing your voice, which is also an overused word at the moment, but in the sense that
kind of yourself to.
Yeah, and you don't try to be something else, or to please someone else, or to be like you're not. You're lying a bit, like you're hiding in language. So I think I was reading Brian Dillon Essayisms. It's a beautiful book about how to write essays, and he writes about Roland Barthes. And he says he goes to that book not about theories for photography, but about because of that certain vulnerability that is in that book. It starts with a very personal thing, and it becomes that art theory, the most famous art theory about photography. It's amazing. Start with a very personal, very daily, very everyday research. So I love that too. That because theory is mostly thought of for only abstract thinkers, academic thinkers, something only certain people can do. But actually, it starts from very everyday experiences.
Can you elaborate a bit more on the morning coffee writing exercise? Because I think that's I'm kind of also looking in this podcast for some small exercises that people can do after listening, something that they can do on their own. And can you give us tell us a bit more and give some pointers as to how to do it, how to approach it?
Oh, yes, I can. This is my favorite exercise ever. The coffee cup exercise, I can say that I invented it. I still needed to, become very popular so I can make money.
Trademark it.
Brand it. The coffee exercise from An Paenhuysen. Yeah. So anyways, it's very simple. It's mostly in the morning, I guess. For me, it's in the morning when I go to a cafe, have a coffee, and I'm still foggy in the head, and I start drawing the coffee cup. If you're not good at drawing, that's even better. Then you don't try to be good at it. If you try to be good at something, it means you think you know what good is. So it's better not trying to be good at it. So you just start drawing your coffee cup. And it's good because it wakens up a certain part of your brain. I forgot which part, but certain part of your brain. So the drawing, it learns you also skills and observation. You learn to look really well. So it's very good for an art critic. And then you start just writing a few words to it. It can be overheard conversation, a few comment about the weather, whatever. And then in between the image and the words, a picture haiku comes about. So first of all, you get the visual character of language, right? It becomes something visual. It becomes a haiku, almost a picture haiku, the coffee cup and the words. And sometimes it's very charming. You won't see the charm immediately. My advice is to let it rest for a few months, maybe a few years. And after you'll look back at it and the date and, that day when I was doing that coffee cup exercise. It's like wine. It gets better with the years. So it will be charming to look at it back. And that's the coffee exercise. So it's 2-3 minutes of writing. And then you happily can start your day because you feel like you did a bit of writing in the morning.
Some haiku, but that also leads me you mentioned haiku coming out of this exercise, and that kind of leads me also to something that I feel like might be intimidating for people who are kind of at the beginning or young writers, that kind of the language oftentimes is very beautiful and poetic, and kind of I'm wondering, how do you approach kind of poeticism versus language that might be, I guess, poetic language, inaccessible academic language, and kind of more everyday language that we use. Kind of how do you approach it in art writing? Is there like a preference that you have, or should this be a more organic kind of way that people just discover their own style of writing?
I do think art criticism can be a literature, so it can be a work of art. It can be, a beautiful piece to read, and even after the artwork has gone, maybe it can be still interesting to read. It can still open up to a certain time. If you read Dorothy Parker about her theater criticism of the 20s, it's such a great read. And I'm not interested in theater at all, at least a little bit. But so anyway, so our criticism can be beautifully written. And as I said before, I think the content is connected to the form. So if you pay attention to the rhythm of your writing, where the reader can breathe, where you cut a sentence, where you leave space for the reader to think for themselves, it's very important, right? So I always think you should read your criticism out loud a few times so it has a rhythm. And then I think what is very beautiful is when an art review has an open ending, when it doesn't close things off at the end, like
with a judgment.
Mostly, judgment, or I'll come back. This was really interesting. I'm going back to see that a second time, or anything that closes, really. So the most beautiful is when it opens up and the reader can start continues thinking and opens up. The reader can think for themselves. So, and that's poetry. Poetry is for me this little extra, this creating space to open up something to beyond actuality, to something that touches everyone, humanity. You can call it transcendence, spirituality, poetry. But something that what the art does is to connect, us, and it goes beyond what is currently happening. So still in 100 years, it can still touch us. And if art criticism can open up that element, then you create also intimacy with the reader, when you touch. And that's poetry for me. If that's in difficult language or poetic language, I don't know, but I don't like too much difficult language in art criticism.
Thank you. I mean, I really like this definition that this is kind of what makes poetry. It's I think that's really beautiful. I think to kind of round up our conversation, I'd like to ask you about the future of art criticism, art writing. I would like to know, what do you see as a future of art criticism? And if there are any emerging trends of new directions, approaches in this area that are interesting and exciting for you?
Yes, maybe I already pointed out that a little bit, that people are doing more their own thing with art criticism, and that people are really interested in experimenting with it much more, and to not so intimidated anymore by criticism, which is nice. So, and I think a lot of cool people are starting their own, not only for themselves, but also for other people, to open up platforms where other people can join in too, talking about collaboration before, and creating possibilities there also to write about other kinds of artists and so on. So I think that's happening a lot. So I have a hard time thinking really far in the future, but for now, it seems like a very good moment for art criticism. So,
well, thank you so much. Let's hope this momentum will stay with us, and there'll be more new interesting developments. And just for the last time, I'd like to thank you for coming onto this podcast and sharing your expertise and your passion for writing. It was really wonderful talking to you today.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much.